The keys felt heavier than they should have. I stood in Rebecca Marsh's office in Cody and watched her staple the last page to a packet I barely remembered signing. Outside, March wind pushed tumbleweeds across the parking lot like small, stubborn planets. "Congratulations, Mr. Nelson," she said, smiling as if she'd handed me something larger than an $85,000 check and a deed. Maybe she had. 40 years of overtime, packed lunches, skipped vacations. The kind of life that chews up time and coughs out a six-figure number, now sat in my pocket. 800 square feet of weathered cedar and solitude. 12 miles from anything that might call for a meeting or an apology. I took the keys and they were mine. My fingers were steadier than I expected. The road west from Cody narrowed the further I went. Pavement became gravel, gravel became dirt, and the world thinned into pine and sky. I stopped at a general store for coffee. Bread, eggs, butter. The clerk asked if I was visiting. Living, I told him, and he nodded as if I'd made the wisest choice of the century. The last 2 miles climbed through trees so thick the afternoon sun broke into shards. When the cabin appeared, it looked exactly like the photographs: green metal roof, stone chimney, logs softened by 100 seasons of weather. I cut the engine and sat quietly. A small herd of elk grazed 50 yards from the porch. For 5 minutes I watched them. No honking, no sirens, no radio, just the long, slow chewing of animals and the wind in the treetops. I made coffee late in the day and carried the cup to the porch. A hawk cut a lazy thermal overhead. The rocking chair I bought for mornings creaked welcome under me. This was what I had saved for. What sleep-deprived weeks at the job had been for. A life that started and ended with the sound of the wind. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine sap and old wood smoke. A single main room held a kitchenette. A bedroom fit a double bed like a compact promise. I unpacked slowly as if by placing each thing with intention I could slow time down. Tools on a pegboard sat like quiet sentries: hammer, wrenches, handsaw, each in its designated place. Books slid onto a shelf by topic: history, engineering manuals, 3 novels I had meant to read for a decade. I positioned the coffee maker where the morning light would hit it first. By day's end I had created a small order that kept the chaos of cardboard at bay. I called Beulah. Her voice came through bright and immediate. "Dad, are you there? Did you get it?" she asked. "I signed the papers this morning," I said. "I'm sitting on the porch watching elk." "I'm so proud of you," she said. The warmth in her voice made something catch in my chest. For a moment I let it. We talked about small certainties: students, her garden plans, the weather, familiar anchors around a new island I'd claimed for myself. Then the phone rang again, and the world shifted. Cornelius's voice was flat in that way he reserved for conference calls. "My parents are moving in with you for a couple months until they find something," he said. "If you don't like it, come back to the city." I looked at the keys in my palm. For an instant they were just metal. Then they were everything I had been trying to buy. Silence. A margin to breathe. "Wait, what?" I said. My hand tightened on the armrest until the knuckles blanched. "It's just temporary," he said. "They'll be fine for a while. Text me their arrival time." Then the line went dead. I did not say the thing that wanted to be said, the list of years I had swallowed because family peace seemed cheaper than friction. I did not say the slow, accumulated ledger of small humiliations that had shaped half my life. I sat, coffee gone cold in my hand, in a chair that still knew the shape of my shoulders. The elk had moved deeper into the clearing. A hawk circled again. The clearing felt suddenly smaller and the keys heavier. That night I did not sleep. Not because I was anxious in the thin, helpless way people imagine. The feeling that kept me awake was clearer than that. It was calculation, an old, precise part of me that measured load-bearing capacity and safety margins. I dug out an engineering pad from my jacket pocket, the grid paper I'd carried for 4 decades, and I began to write. Not pages of rage or lists of grievances, but neat columns, timeline estimates, resource assessments, questions rewritten until they made sense. When do they arrive? Who will transport them? What will their needs be? What obligations am I actually under? Beside these practical concerns, I made other notes: contingencies, presumed responses, Legal research I would have to commission. The keys sat on the table, heavy and deliberate, and I set them down with the kind of care you give a fragile promise. By dawn the pad was dense with plans. Coffee cups made a small semicircle around the notebook like quiet witnesses. My mind had not been this sharp in years, formerly numbed by schedules and concessions. It now cleared like glass in sun. At first light I cleaned up, loaded the truck, and drove back to Cody. I parked at the ranger station outside town as if I had merely gone to ask directions. Inside, educational displays showed wolves and elk on laminated boards. A ranger I guessed to be in his 40s, face weathered from an outdoor lifetime, looked up from his desk. "Help you?" he asked. I told him I'd just moved into a cabin off County Road 14. He smiled, that slow smile people adopt when they know you've chosen the right kind of trouble. "You'll want to be careful with food storage," he said. "Bear activity comes in spring. Wolves are in the area, too. They're usually shy, but they have incredible noses." I nodded as if I were new to this life. I asked the right questions: range patterns, seasonal behavior, how far off to leave food if one wanted to discourage animals from the porch. He handed me a pamphlet. I took careful notes in my field notebook. Every word I said was tuned to sound like the rookie who wanted to learn, the innocuous posture that keeps professionals talking. It bought me maps and details: wind direction, packed territories, migration timing. Back in Cody I found the outdoor supply store with taxidermy heads on the wall and rows of camouflage. In the camera section, motion-activated trail cams glinted in their boxes. Night vision, cellular connectivity. The clerk told me which models caught wildlife without false positives. I paid cash. A quiet transaction. I installed 2 cameras at the cabin that afternoon. One on the driveway, one angled at the porch. Testing motion activation until the frames were perfect. Weak cellular service meant 1 bar. But the feed was functional. The engineering part of me took pleasure in the precision, angle, concealment, redundancy, test, adjust, verify. When I left Cody that evening to return to the clearing, the keys in my pocket felt like a tool again rather than a talisman. They were for a house. Yes, but they were also a mechanism. A hinge I could use to swing a door closed or open one wide. I drove slowly down the dirt road thinking about margins and leverage and the strange, stupid calculus of family. I thought about how, after 40 years of being reasonable, I had decided that patience was no longer a virtue if it meant losing myself. By the time the pines swallowed the last of the road, I had a plan forming in neat columns on the pad: small, deliberate acts that would test assumptions, gather evidence, and, if needed, create options. The sun dropped behind the ridge. The cabin waited, and somewhere between the trees and the keys and the notebook, something in me shifted from wanting to be peaceful to being prepared. The morning air tasted like pine and iron. A thin mist hugged the ground around the cabin, the kind that muffles sound and sharpens thought. I stood on the porch, cup of coffee in hand, looking out across the clearing where the elk had grazed 2 days before. The forest was quiet now, too quiet, almost, as if it sensed what I was about to do. I hadn't been reckless in decades, but that morning, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a young man fixing a collapsing bridge in winter rain: absolute clarity. Clarity about what must be done and why. Cornelius had drawn his battle lines with a single phone call. He thought he could take what I'd built, the first piece of peace I'd had in my entire life, and turn it into his convenience. He mistook silence for submission. That mistake was going to cost him. After breakfast, I drove to the small butcher shop tucked behind Main Street. The bell above the door gave a tired jingle as I stepped in. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of raw fat and iron. "Need 20 pounds of beef scraps," I said. "Organ meat, trimmings, for dogs." The butcher, a man who'd seen too many winters to ask unnecessary questions, nodded. $45. I paid cash. When he slid the white wrapped parcels across the counter, the smell hit immediately: dense, metallic, primal. I loaded them into the cooler on the truck bed and drove back toward the cabin. Windows open, letting the cold air slice through the scent. At the ranger station, I had listened carefully. Wolves avoid human noise, but they are opportunists. The right scent, the right distance, and they'd come close enough to be seen but not close enough to attack. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted Leonard and Grace to meet the reality of the wilderness they were so eager to invade. By late afternoon, the wind had shifted west. Perfect. I carried the cooler into the trees, counting my steps, feeling the soft crunch of pine needles under my boots. 30 yards upwind from the cabin, I spread the meat into 3 separate piles, spaced just enough that the smell would fan outward. A red invitation written in blood and fat. As I walked back, I felt oddly calm, every motion deliberate, every breath measured. The forest absorbed my footsteps like it approved. When I reached the porch, I paused, looking at the door I had locked behind me. For a moment, I almost pitied them, those 2 soft people who thought the world existed for their comfort. Almost. Inside, I secured the windows, turned off unnecessary power, and set the thermostat low to protect the pipes. Then I gathered my essentials, a few clothes, the laptop, the notepad thick with plans, and placed them neatly in the truck. I locked the door and slid the keys into my pocket. 3 days I had lived here. That was enough time to make it mine. Enough time to defend it. The drive back to Denver took 5 hours. The city felt louder than I remembered. Harsher somehow, but it offered one thing the woods didn't: distance. I went straight to my old house. The one I hadn't sold yet. Still full of the ghost of my old life, bare furniture. Boxes. Silence that didn't feel earned. I set the laptop on the living room table and connected to the cabin's cameras. 2 screens flickered to life. One showed the driveway entrance, the other, the porch. The connection was weak but steady. I adjusted the view until everything was framed perfectly. Then I waited. Friday morning, 10 a.m. A sedan pulled up. Even through the shaky feed, I recognized them instantly. Leonard and Grace, both dressed for comfort rather than survival. They stepped out, squinting, their faces marked by a faint disgust that seemed permanent. "This is where he's living now," Grace said, wrinkling her nose. "It smells like pine and dirt." "At least it's free," Leonard replied. I watched, unmoving, as they walked toward the porch. Grace lagged behind, scanning the trees, uneasy. The forest around them shifted. It started small, movement at the far edge of the frame. Then 3 shapes emerged from the treeline, gray, brown, low to the ground, moving with the fluid caution of predators who understood patience. Wolves. Grace froze. Leonard's face drained of color. "Get in the car," he whispered, then louder. "Get in the car, now." Grace stumbled, recovered, and they both ran. Gravel sprayed behind their tires as the sedan fishtail edged down the drive. A plume of dust marking their retreat. The wolves, uninterested in their panic, padded toward the meat piles, noses down, tails flicking lazily. I sat back and watched, not with cruelty, just with the quiet satisfaction of balance being restored. The wilderness had delivered the message more effectively than I ever could. 20 minutes later, the phone rang. Cornelius. His voice came through the speaker like static wrapped in anger. "What did you do?" he shouted. "My parents nearly got attacked. You set that up." "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I warned you this is wilderness country. Wolves live here. You baited them." "Cornelius," I said, evenly, "I live in wolf country. Wolves live here. That's reality. Maybe next time, ask before deciding where other people should live." There was a pause. A silence thick with disbelief and fury. "You're insane," he hissed. "This isn't over." "No," I said, "it's just beginning." The line went dead. I sat for a while, letting the words settle in the air. Then I poured another cup of coffee and watched the video again. The wolves finished the meat, one after another, then melted back into the trees. Outside my Denver window, I could see the faint outline of the Rockies in the distance. Somewhere up there, my cabin waited, empty, safe, untouched. I had planned this as defense. But watching the screen, I understood something had shifted inside me. This wasn't about defense anymore. This was the moment I stopped apologizing for wanting peace and started protecting it. 2 days passed after the wolf incident. I didn't call anyone. I didn't explain. The footage spoke for itself. And silence was its own kind of weapon. But silence, I soon learned, could be twisted just as easily as words. The first call came from my cousin Linda. I hadn't heard her voice in years. "Ray," she said, drawing out the word like she was testing it for cracks. "Cornelius called me. He's worried about you." "Worried?" I asked. "About what?" She hesitated. "He said, you've been acting strangely. Paranoid. That you're living alone in the woods. Setting traps. Talking about wolves." The words settled over me like a layer of ash. I let a pause stretch long enough for the truth to reveal itself. "He's building a story," I said finally, "and he's using you to spread it." "Ray." "I'm fine. Linda, thank you for your concern." I ended the call gently, but firmly. The second came from an old colleague in Denver. Then another from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. Each one carried the same tone, polite curiosity hiding suspicion. Cornelius was working the phones like a public relations campaign, painting me as the unstable retiree who'd lost his grip on reality. That night, I sat at the kitchen table in my half-empty house, the glow from the laptop screen casting long shadows across the room. My notes lay open beside me, pages of diagrams, timelines, and calculations that now served another purpose: evidence. For 40 years, I'd built bridges and towers that stood against wind, weight, and time. I'd learned that every structure starts to fail at the smallest unseen crack. Cornelius was looking for my reputation, my credibility, my sanity. If he could convince enough people I was losing it, then taking my property would look like an act of mercy, not theft. I wasn't about to let that happen. I typed carefully, each word deliberate. To David Thornton, attorney at law. Subject: request for legal counsel, family pressure and asset protection. Dear Mr. Thornton, I am seeking advice regarding escalating family interference concerning my recently purchased property in Park County. I believe my son-in-law may attempt to challenge my competency or claim conservatorship. Please advise on the most secure method to protect my assets and independence. I hit send. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the email, a small pulse of quiet defiance. The reply came the next morning. Thornton could meet Thursday afternoon in Cody. His fee, $300 per hour. Worth every cent if he could help me keep my life mine. In the meantime, I made myself busy. I replaced the porch railing, sharpened the saw blades, walked the perimeter of the property, counting steps, taking notes on wind direction and natural cover. The mechanical rhythm calmed me. But peace was short-lived. Thursday came. I shaved, put on a clean shirt, and drove the winding road into town. Thornton's office was on Sheridan Avenue, second floor above a hardware store. His door was plain oak. His name stenciled in black: David Thornton, attorney at law. He greeted me with a firm handshake, weathered, direct, the kind of man who had built fences before he built cases. His office smelled faintly of dust and paper, lined with law books and photos of Wyoming landscapes. "Mr. Nelson," he said, motioning me to sit, "I read your email. Tell me everything from the beginning." I did, from the phone call that shattered my first evening of peace, to the wolves, to the campaign of whispers that followed. Thornton didn't interrupt. He listened, pen scratching quietly across his legal pad, eyes steady. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Your son-in-law's behavior fits a pattern. This isn't about concern, it's about control." He tapped the pen on his notepad. "If he's spreading rumors of instability, he's likely preparing to petition for conservatorship, legal guardianship over your affairs. It's a common tactic when money or property is involved." "And the solution?" I asked. "A revocable living trust," he said. "We transfer ownership of your property and assets into a trust managed by an independent trustee. It's still yours, but protected from manipulation. Family pressure becomes legally meaningless." I nodded slowly, feeling something harden inside me, the same sensation I used to get before sealing a final blueprint. "How soon can we start?" "Immediately," Thornton said. 2 weeks to draft everything." He paused, studying me. "Mr. Nelson, I'll be blunt. Your son-in-law will escalate. Once he realizes he can't touch your assets, he'll try to discredit you. Be prepared for him to involve adult protective services." To paint me as incompetent. I said. Exactly. I'll be ready. The drive back to the cabin was long and quiet. The late afternoon light turned the mountains into silhouettes of iron and gold. I thought of Beulah, her gentle voice, her nervous laughter when things went wrong, the way she always tried to smooth conflict. I had built my life on that same instinct. But peace bought through surrender isn't peace at all. It's erosion. When I reached the cabin, I stepped out into the cold and watched the sky fade to deep violet. The wolves had moved on. The clearing was still. The world felt sharper, cleaner. Inside, I sat at the table again. Same chair, same notepad, but this time the writing wasn't just planning, it was resolve. Cornelius wanted to turn my silence into weakness. I was going to turn it into a fortress. The next morning began with purpose. The kind of quiet, concentrated resolve that comes only after you've stopped waiting for someone else to do the right thing. I brewed coffee strong enough to bite, packed the leather folder with every document that mattered, the deed, bank statements, correspondence, and drove into Cody. The mountains along Highway 14 rose like witnesses to what I was about to do. David Thornton was already waiting when I arrived. His office looked different in daylight, full of sun slanting across neat piles of paper and heavy books. He had the kind of focus I trusted instantly, calm, measured, used to dealing with problems that required more patience than rage. We spent 2 hours going over every detail. I gave him a full timeline: the cabin purchase, Cornelius's call, the threats, the rumors, the attempts to isolate me. Thornton listened without interruption, only asking questions that mattered. When I finished, he leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "Mr. Nelson," he said, "I have to tell you, your documentation is remarkable. It makes my job easier." 40 years in construction engineering. I replied, "Documentation prevents collapse." He smiled slightly. "Then you'll appreciate what we're about to build." He opened a folder and began to outline what he called my legal fortress, the Revocable Living Trust. It would cost roughly $2.400 to draft and execute. But once complete, my cabin, savings, and investments would belong to the trust, not to me personally. Thornton would serve as the independent trustee, which meant any claim, even from family, would hit a wall of law thicker than any foundation I'd ever poured. He explained how the trust would function. My property would remain under my full control while I was alive. Upon my passing, the assets would transfer only under strict conditions. And one of those conditions, by my choice, would be that Beulah could inherit only if she divorced Cornelius or if Cornelius signed a legal waiver relinquishing all claims to my estate. When he finished explaining, he looked at me carefully. "Are you sure about that clause? It's unusual." "Not unfair," I said. "I'm protecting my daughter from being used as a funnel for someone else's greed. He's already shown what he's capable of." Thornton nodded once. "Understood." I signed the initial authorization, then shook his hand. The sound of our palms meeting felt like the closing of a gate. On my way home, clouds were rolling in from the west, big, gray slabs moving low over the pines. The air had that metallic weight that meant snow wasn't far away. When I turned onto the narrow dirt road leading to my property, I saw a car already there. A sleek black sedan, too clean for this landscape. My stomach tightened. Cornelius was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, dressed like he was still in the city, pressed shirt, no jacket, expensive shoes coated with dust. I stopped the truck 20 yards away, left the engine running, and got out slowly. "Cornelius," I said, "you're on my property." He pushed off the car, eyes sharp. "You set this up, didn't you? The trust, the lawyer, Beulah told me. You're cutting the family out." I held up my phone. "Already recording. You're being filmed," I said calmly. "If you have something to say, say it clearly." He stepped closer, red in the face. "You think you're clever? You're manipulating my wife, turning her against me, hiding money." "The trust protects my assets," I said evenly. "It ensures Beulah inherits properly." "Properly?" he barked. "Unless she divorces me? That's what you want, isn't it? To destroy my marriage?" "What I want," I said, voice steady, is to make sure the man who tried to steal my home never controls my daughter's future. His voice rose, shrill with rage. I'll get a lawyer. I'll contest this. I'll make sure you never see her again. You're threatening to isolate my daughter from her father because I used the law to protect myself. I said, that's interesting. For a moment, silence. Then he spat, this isn't over, before storming back to his car. Gravel sprayed as he reversed and disappeared down the road. I watched until the dust settled. Then I stopped the recording and uploaded it to cloud storage, labeling it, Cornelius Confrontation. April 12th. Verbal threats documented. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the screen. The video played back his anger perfectly, the tone, the posture, the words that would later prove intent. I sent the file to Thornton with a short note. Subject: Evidence, hostile confrontation. Please archive and advise next step. His reply came an hour later. Continue documenting everything. Expect escalation. Next move: secure medical proof of competency before they weaponize your age. That night, I poured 1 glass of bourbon. The wind was howling outside, a low animal sound curling through the chimney. I thought about how, in a lifetime of solving problems with structure and numbers, this was the first time I'd had to use the same precision on human deceit. The next morning, I called Dr. Patricia Chen's clinic in Cody. The receptionist answered with a soft, professional calm. I'd like to schedule a full physical and cognitive evaluation. I said, preventive. I want documentation of my health and mental competency. Of course, she replied. We can see you Monday at 10. Thank you, I said. When I hung up, I looked around the cabin, the solid walls, the smell of cedar and old smoke, the quiet hum of a place built to outlast storms. Cornelius thought I was an old man on the defensive. He didn't realize he'd awakened the part of me that built bridges in flood zones and skyscrapers that shrugged off wind. This wasn't me being paranoid. This was me reinforcing my foundation before someone tried to tear it apart. And by the time he made his next move, every inch of this life would already be bulletproof. Monday morning arrived with a sharp blue sky and the smell of thawing pine. I drove into Cody early. The mountains etched clear against the horizon. My folder of papers seat-belted beside me like a companion. Dr. Patricia Chen greeted me herself. She was small, brisk, and spoke with the precision of someone who had spent decades separating truth from panic. You're here for a full cognitive evaluation, Mr. Nelson? Yes, I want written documentation of my health, mental and physical. I've been told certain family members might question it. Her eyes softened. Unfortunately, I've seen that before. It's wise of you to get ahead of it. For 90 minutes, she tested and prodded. Reflexes, blood pressure, balance. She asked me to draw a clock showing 3:15. Then recall a list of words: apple, table, penny. 5 minutes later, I passed them all. When she asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens, I recited the sequence cleanly, the rhythm of logic steady in my voice. Afterward, she printed the assessment on letterhead. Mr. Raymond Nelson is physically healthy, cognitively intact, and fully capable of managing his own affairs. No signs of dementia, confusion, or diminished capacity observed. She stamped it, signed it, and slid it across the desk. Keep the original, she said, and make copies for your lawyer. Thank you, I told her. You've done more than you know. 2 days later, my test arrived. I was in the shed, reorganizing tools, when a gray sedan turned up the driveway. It stopped a polite distance from the porch. Engine idling. A woman stepped out, mid-40s. Dark blazer, government badge on her lapel. Mr. Nelson? She called. Yes. I'm Margaret Willows, Adult Protective Services. I'm here regarding a complaint about your welfare. I froze, not in fear, but recognition. Thornton had warned me. Cornelius's next move. I wiped my hands on a rag and gestured toward the porch. Of course. Would you like to come in? She blinked, a little surprised by my calm. That would be fine. Inside, I held the door open and motioned toward the kitchen. Coffee? No, thank you. This is a routine welfare check. We received a report alleging that you may be unable to care for yourself or your property. Ah, I said mildly. Let me guess, an anonymous complaint? Her eyes flicked up from her tablet. I can't disclose that. Of course. She began walking slowly through the cabin, noting details. Stocked refrigerator, organized tools, clean floors, bills neatly filed on the counter. All current. She asked if I had any trouble managing finances or household chores. None, I said. I've lived alone since I retired. I'm meticulous by habit. When she asked about my mental state, I retrieved the folder from my desk and handed her the evaluation from Dr. Chen. She read it carefully. This is recent, very thorough. I anticipated false allegations, I said. I wanted evidence ready. A small smile ghosted across her face. That's quite strategic, Mr. Nelson. 40 years as an engineer, I replied. Planning ahead keeps structures standing. By the time she left, her tone had shifted from polite distance to quiet respect. You'll receive official notice once my report is filed, she said. If this complaint was made in bad faith, it will be noted. Thank you for your time, I said. When her car disappeared down the road, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The forest seemed to exhale with me. 3 days later, Thornton called. Ray, we got copies of the official complaint. Cornelius and Leonard signed it. Grace added a statement. They claim you threatened them with weapons, refuse medical care, and are suffering from delusions about wolves. I closed my eyes for a moment, gripping the phone. I don't own any firearms. The wolves are on camera. I know, Thornton said. We'll respond formally, but you should read this. He sent the document via email. I opened it at the kitchen table. Each sentence was a lie, carefully crafted to sound plausible. Exhibits paranoia, dangerous isolation, refuses contact with family, potential risk to self or others. At the bottom, Grace's handwriting added one final dagger. Endangered us with wild animals. Needs immediate evaluation for competency. For a long time I just stared at the page. My hands were steady, but my jaw locked tight enough to ache. They weren't trying to take my cabin anymore, they were trying to take me. 10 days later, Margaret Willows's report arrived by certified mail. Case closed. Allegations unfounded. Subject is competent, living independently, and maintaining safe conditions. Complaint appears motivated by family property dispute rather than genuine concern. No further action required. I sat at the table and read it twice. Then a third time. Relief didn't feel like triumph, it felt like oxygen after nearly drowning. I placed the letter in a new folder labeled APS, False Complaint Evidence, adding the supporting materials in order. The original allegations. Margaret's full assessment. Dr. Chen's medical evaluation. Photographs of the cabin interior. My written response to each claim. Everything neat, indexed, dated, a complete defense, ready for the next storm. Because I knew there would be one. That evening, while sorting receipts, my phone buzzed. Thornton again, his voice quick, urgent. Ray, I found something else. Leonard and Grace have been using your cabin address for official mail. I frowned. What kind of mail? Wyoming Department of Family Services, a credit union, and the Social Security Administration. They've been claiming your cabin as their residence. That could be mail fraud, even benefits fraud. I set my coffee down carefully. How long? At least 6 weeks. I suggest you check your mailbox and photograph everything before touching it. The next morning, I drove down to the end of the dirt road. The metal mailbox stood crooked, half swallowed by tall grass. I pulled on gloves and opened it. 3 envelopes waited inside, each with their names, Leonard Harrison, Grace Harrison, printed in tidy black letters above my address. I took photos front and back. The postmarks clear. Then I slipped the envelopes into a Ziploc evidence bag I kept in the truck. Old habits die hard, and an engineer never ignores documentation. Back at the cabin, I laid the bag on the table and called Thornton. They're using my address, I said. Federal mail. What do we do? He didn't hesitate. We reported to the U.S. Attorney's Office. If they've filed benefits under a false address, that's federal fraud. We'll handle it quietly. No drama. Let the law take its course. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not out of spite, but clarity. They had built their story out of lies. I was building mine out of evidence. And I knew which structure would still be standing when this was all over. The morning after the mail fraud discovery, I woke earlier than usual. The forest was washed clean from last night's rain, and a cold brightness spilled across the porch. I brewed coffee, black and strong, then called Thornton. He answered on the first ring. Good timing. I've been digging into the Harrisons' records. You'll want to hear this. Go on. Leonard and Grace aren't the only ones in financial trouble, he said. Cornelius and Beulah have missed 3 consecutive mortgage payments. Their home in Denver is $8,400 in arrears. The bank has already filed a notice of default. I stared out at the mist curling between the trees. So that's it. That's the reason for all of this. It gets worse, Thornton continued. I found something else in Colorado public records. Cornelius took out a home equity line of credit, $35,000, 8 months ago. Single signature. Your daughter's name doesn't appear anywhere. I felt the bottom of my stomach go cold. He hid it from her. Almost certainly, if he's in default now, that money's gone, spent. It explains the desperation. He's trying to find cash wherever he can. Your property, your assets, it all fits the pattern. I didn't speak for a moment. The sound of the wind filled the silence. Finally, Thornton said, Ray, you have a few options. One is purely defensive. Wait it out and let the law handle the Harrisons. The other is more proactive. Define proactive. You could buy the delinquent debt. Banks sell defaulted loans at a discount to collection agencies. If you create a small LLC, you could purchase the mortgage anonymously. That would make you the creditor. Cornelius would have no idea he owes you. For a long moment, I just listened to the hum of the phone line. Why would I do that? I asked. Because right now, he's cornered, and cornered people do dangerous things. If you control the debt, you control his next move. It gives you leverage and protection. Would Beulah be at risk? Not legally, but emotionally, yes. I'd advise keeping this quiet until the timing's right. The word leverage echoed in my mind long after we hung up. That afternoon, I drove into Cody and opened a business account under the name Mountain Holdings LLC. Thornton's office handled the paperwork. The bank didn't ask questions. A week later, the transaction cleared. $31,000 wired from my savings to purchase the delinquent mortgage. When the documents arrived by courier, I sat at the kitchen table, reading each page carefully. Every detail was in order. The loan, principal, interest, late fees, all now payable to Mountain Holdings LLC. And I was the sole beneficial owner. I folded the papers neatly into a leather folder labeled leverage and locked it in the drawer beside my trust documents. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and went out to the porch. The forest was quiet except for the low rhythm of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. The air smelled like wet soil and pine. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, like a man reinforcing a dam while watching storm clouds gather. The next morning, I called Thornton. It's done, I said. Mountain Holdings owns the mortgage. Good. Now we wait. Don't engage with them unless absolutely necessary. But wait was not a word Cornelius understood. 3 days later, he called. His voice was tight, trembling with controlled fury. You think you're clever, don't you? You bought a trust. You bought a lawyer. Now what? You think this makes you untouchable? I'm just managing my affairs, I said evenly. You're turning everyone against me. Even Beulah. I haven't turned anyone. You've done that yourself. You're not going to win. Old man, he spat. You can't isolate her from me. Cornelius, I said quietly. The only person isolating her is you. He hung up before I could finish. That evening, I sat at my desk. The phone still warm in my hand. The light outside was fading, and the forest was a dark blur beyond the window. I opened my notebook and began to write. Cornelius is cornered. Cornered animals attack. Prepare for escalation. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't hear from him. The stillness felt unnatural, like the woods holding its breath before a storm. During that time, the federal case against Leonard and Grace began to move forward. Thornton had sent the evidence package to Assistant U.S. Attorney James Morrison, and the response came back swift and certain: investigation opened. I didn't rejoice. I didn't gloat. I simply watched the system I trusted begin to turn its slow, deliberate gears. But peace never lasts long when someone desperate is running out of options. On a gray Monday in June, a thick envelope arrived from Thornton's office. Inside were copies of the trust, updated banking statements, and a brief note in his handwriting. All assets now protected: cabin, retirement funds, and mountain holdings under full legal cover. You're insulated. Insulated, a word that used to mean warmth now sounded like distance. That same night, I got a call from Beulah. Her voice was soft, tired. Dad, Cornelius has been strange lately, asking questions about your finances, whether you changed your will. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. I did some estate planning. Yes, it's the responsible thing to do. He said it's betrayal, she whispered. He said you're cutting him out. Why would that bother him? It's not his inheritance. Because, she hesitated, he said you set up a trust that only benefits me if I divorce him. Is that true? I took a breath. That's true. It protects you from being trapped financially. If something happens to me, you inherit free and clear. Dad, he's furious. He says you're manipulating me. Beulah, I said softly, you're a grown woman. You know who's been honest with you, and who hasn't. There was silence on the line. When she finally spoke, her voice broke. I don't know what to believe anymore. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the dark window. The reflection of my own face looked back at me, older. Yes, but not weak. I thought of all the years I'd spent solving structural problems. Load, resistance, tension. Every system failed for the same reason: pressure applied in the wrong place for too long. Cornelius was cracking, and when he broke, I needed to make sure the pieces didn't land on my daughter. I opened the folder marked leverage again and looked at the mortgage documents. I didn't see numbers. I saw control. And I promised myself something. This would end soon, not with anger. Not with shouting, but with precision. The kind that leaves nothing standing but the truth. The first week of August brought a strange calm, the kind that doesn't feel like peace but like the breath before thunder. Every day I woke early, made coffee, walked the perimeter of the clearing, and pretended things were normal. But I could feel the air tightening. Somewhere in Denver, Cornelius was plotting. Somewhere in between, my daughter was still caught in the middle, torn between the man who raised her and the one who used her. I'd had enough waiting. That Friday, I sent her a message. Honey, we need to talk, just you and me. Can you come to the cabin this weekend? There are things about your finances you need to know. The reply came a few minutes later. Is everything okay? You're worrying me. Everything's fine, I wrote, but you need to hear the truth in person. Saturday at noon, just you. She agreed. The next morning, I cleaned the cabin even though it didn't need it. I set out coffee cups, made chicken salad for sandwiches, her childhood favorite, and placed a folder of documents neatly on the kitchen table. Mortgage records, the HELOC, the trust structure, screenshots of federal case updates. Everything laid out in the same careful order I'd once used for blueprints. At 11:30, I saw her car on the driveway. Dust trailed behind it like smoke from an old memory. Beulah stepped out slowly, wearing jeans and a cardigan, her hair pulled back in the same way her mother used to do. She looked tired, older than her 30-something years. When I hugged her, she felt fragile, like someone carrying too much invisible weight. Dad, she said softly, what's this about? Let's sit down. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and wood smoke. She glanced at the folder but didn't open it. We made small talk first, her students. The new school term, the garden she never had time to tend. I could tell she was delaying the real question. Finally, she looked at me, eyes full of quiet dread. Okay, she said, tell me what's going on. I took a slow breath. Your house is in foreclosure. Beulah, 3 months behind. The bank has already filed notice. Her face drained of color. That's not possible. Cornelius pays the mortgage online every month. That's what he told you. I slid the notice of default across the table. This is what the bank says. She scanned the page, her lips trembling. This says the loan was sold to Mountain Holdings LLC. Who is that? I held her gaze. That's me, or rather, a company I set up through my lawyer. I bought your debt from the bank. Her hands shook. You bought our mortgage? Why would you do that? That's insane. To protect you, I said quietly. If the bank foreclosed, you'd lose the house. Now, I control the debt. Cornelius can't touch it. She stood up suddenly, pushing the chair back with a screech. You should have told me. How could you do this behind my back? Would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd said your husband was lying to you about money, would you have believed me? Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know. I reached for the next document, the HELOC papers, and slid them toward her. Then you need to see this. She hesitated before opening it. Her breath caught halfway down the first page. This is a $35 line of credit, she whispered, but there's only one signature. His. In Colorado, one spouse can open a home equity loan under certain conditions. I said, he did it 8 months ago. You never knew. Her fingers clenched the paper. Where did the money go? I hesitated. Best guess? Covering his father's gambling debts. Leonard lost nearly $50 in online poker. She looked up, eyes wide, horror mixing with disbelief. You can't know that. You told me yourself. I reminded her gently. You said Leonard lost their house because of gambling. I checked the timelines. The numbers fit perfectly. She sank back into her chair, silent except for the sound of her breathing. After a long moment, she whispered, so all this time, he's been using our home, my home, as collateral for his family's mess. Yes. And you knew for months. Yes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because without proof, you would have believed him. I said softly, he's charming, persuasive, he knows how to twist stories. I couldn't risk that. I needed you to see everything for yourself. She pressed her palms to her eyes. This is too much. Dad, I can't. I know, I said, take your time, but there's more you need to see. I opened the laptop and played the video of Cornelius's confrontation at the porch. His voice filled the room. Furious, shrill. You'll never see her again. The camera caught the shift in his face, rage, arrogance, fear. Beulah covered her mouth, trembling. He threatened you? She whispered. He tried, I said. I recorded it, sent it to my lawyer. Then he filed a false complaint with Adult Protective Services, claiming I was incompetent. She stared at me, stunned. He did what? I handed her the APS report, the official closure letter clearing my name. The case was dismissed. The investigator called it what it was, a manipulation attempt in a family property dispute. For a long while, there was only silence between us. The forest outside hummed with summer insects, the sounds somehow cruelly peaceful. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. I don't even know who he is anymore. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. You know who you are, I said. That's what matters. She nodded weakly. What happens now? You make a choice, I said, and you have to make it soon. What kind of choice? Stay with Cornelius and let him drag you down, or leave him and start over. If you leave, I'll forgive the entire mortgage debt. The house will be yours, free and clear. If you stay, I'll foreclose. Her head snapped up. You're bribing me to divorce him? I'm offering you a lifeline, I said evenly. You don't owe me an answer today. But the truth is coming either way. Federal agents are going to arrest Leonard and Grace soon for mail fraud. Once that happens, Cornelius's part in it will come to light. You need to decide where you want to stand when it does. She rose slowly, shaky but determined. I need time to think. You have a week, I said gently. After that, this all moves forward, with or without you. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes full of exhaustion and grief. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for waiting so long to tell me. I know, I said, but I'd rather have you angry at me for waiting than destroyed because you didn't know. She nodded once, then turned toward the door. I followed her out to the porch. The sun was sliding low across the trees, throwing long shadows over the clearing. She stopped beside her car and looked back at me. Do you really think I can survive this? She asked quietly. Yes, I said, because you're stronger than you think. You just needed to see the truth without his voice in your ear. She drove away without looking back. I stood there long after the sound of her engine faded, the silence thick as the dusk settling around me. I didn't know if I just lost my daughter, or finally saved her. 5 days after Beulah left the cabin, the mountains seemed to hold their breath. The wind softened, the air felt lighter, almost waiting for something to end. I woke before sunrise, poured coffee, and watched the sky shift from gray to gold over the treeline. My hands were steady, my heart wasn't. At exactly 9 o'clock that morning, Thornton called. His tone was calm but edged with quiet finality. Ray, he said, it's happening. The federal agents are at Leonard and Grace's house right now. They're being taken in for questioning. Mail fraud, benefits theft, identity misuse, the works. I stood there on the porch, the mug warming my hands. Thank you for letting me know. This will make national records by afternoon. Thornton continued. When it does, Cornelius will lose whatever ground he has left. Be ready. I've been ready, I said. After we hung up, I sat in silence, listening to the forest breathe. No satisfaction, no vindication, just the steady pulse of inevitability. By noon, the phone rang again. It was Beulah. Her voice trembled. Dad, Cornelius just got a call. His parents were arrested. Fraud, false address, everything. Did you? I reported crimes to the proper authorities. I said simply, that's all. She didn't respond for a long moment. Then, quietly, I need to call you back. She hung up. An hour later, Cornelius called. His voice was pure rage, broken glass through static. You did this. You destroyed my family. Your parents destroyed themselves. I said, they committed federal crimes. I just didn't cover for them. You'll pay for this, he snapped. I'll tell everyone you orchestrated it. That you're vindictive and senile. Go ahead, I said evenly. I have evidence of every lie you've told. My lawyer will be happy to make it public. As if on cue, Thornton walked into my cabin. He'd driven up from Cody that morning. Anticipating this call, I handed him the phone without a word. This is Attorney David Thornton, he said, his voice steady, precise. Mr. Harrison, this is a formal warning. My client acted lawfully and within his rights. Any further threats or attempts to defame him will result in immediate legal action. Silence. Then a click. The call ended. Thornton lowered the phone, nodded once. It's over, Ray. He's out of options. But it wasn't over. Not yet. That Friday afternoon, Cornelius tried to sell his Denver home. Desperation leaves a scent. It draws attention. The realtor ran a title search and discovered the problem. The mortgage was owned by Mountain Holdings LLC. And the property was in default. He couldn't sell without the lionholder's approval. Panicked, he called Thornton's office directly. You can't do this. I need that money. My parents need defense lawyers. Thornton's tone was calm, professional, merciless. My client is willing to discuss terms. You'll receive a formal offer within 24 hours. The offer was simple, printed on legal letterhead and hand-delivered the next morning. Proposal for debt forgiveness. Mr. Cornelius Harrison. In consideration of your cooperation and acknowledgement of wrongdoing, Mountain Holdings LLC offers full forgiveness of the outstanding mortgage balance, $43,400 total, under the following conditions. 1. You will sign divorce papers filed by Mrs. Beulah Harrison with no asset claims. 2. You will sign a sworn statement relinquishing any current or future claim to the property and estate of Mr. Raymond Nelson. 3. You will acknowledge, in writing, that you used Mr. Nelson's property without permission and will refrain from all contact with him. Deadline. 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate foreclosure. The next morning, Beulah called me. Her voice was quiet, exhausted. He tried to convince me to fight it. She said, but I already filed for divorce yesterday. He signed this morning. He's gone. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, my lungs felt full. She continued, I'm moving out of that house. Too many ghosts. I want to find something near you, someplace small, Just mine. We'll find it together, I said. Are you disappointed in me? For what? For not seeing who he was sooner. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. No, Beulah, trusting someone isn't a flaw. It's proof you have a good heart. He abused that. That's on him, not you. Her breath caught. Thank you, Dad. You don't need to thank me, I said softly. You just need to heal. She moved into a small 2-bedroom house in Cody 3 weeks later. Modest, old, with chipped paint and a view of the Absaroka Mountains. I helped her move boxes, fix a leaky faucet, paint the living room a soft yellow she said reminded her of childhood. She found a new teaching position at the local elementary school. Healing wasn't linear. Some days she laughed easily, other days she went quiet for hours, anger flickering behind her eyes. I didn't press. We rebuilt in silence, through small acts of presence, me fixing her porch light, her bringing over apple pie on Sundays. One evening, while chopping vegetables for dinner, she asked, "Do you think I'll ever trust anyone again?" I set down the knife and looked at her. Yes, but you'll never trust the same way. You'll trust slower, wiser, and that's not loss, it's growth. She smiled faintly. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise, I said. I just stopped mistaking patience for weakness. September came, and with it, the first gold of autumn. One crisp evening, she drove up to the cabin for dinner. We cooked spaghetti and ate on the porch, wrapped in blankets as the mountains glowed orange under the setting sun. A herd of elk wandered out of the tree line, moving quietly through the clearing. We watched them without speaking. After a long silence, she said, "Thank you, Dad, for fighting for me even when I didn't understand." Emotion rose sharp in my throat. You don't have to thank me. You're my daughter. That's what fathers do. She smiled, small but genuine. Still, I'm proud of you. When she left that night, I stayed on the porch long after her taillights disappeared down the road. The air smelled of pine and distant rain. Somewhere in the woods, a wolf howled, a low, lonely sound that didn't feel threatening anymore. I thought back to March, when I'd first turned the key in the cabin door and believed peace meant being alone. I'd been wrong. Peace isn't the absence of people, it's the presence of truth. The truth that I could defend myself without hatred, that justice could be quiet, that strength didn't need to shout. I stood, stretched my stiff back, and went inside. On the mantel, a framed photo of Beulah as a child smiled back at me, gap-toothed, joyful, untouched by the world's cruelties. "Good night, kiddo," I said aloud. Then I closed the door, the sound soft against the mountain wind. Outside, the forest settled into silence. Not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of peace hard won, and finally, truly earned.